My name is Thomas, and for 16 years I lived in Atlanta believing that family could be built the way men build houses, with sweat, patience, and a stubborn refusal to walk away when the foundation starts to crack. I thought effort could become love. That if I stayed long enough, worked hard enough, gave everything I had, the walls would hold. Emily had 2 sons when I met her, Jason and Lucas. The boys were 10 and 12 then, all elbows and noise, protective of their mother, suspicious of me. Their father, Mark, had disappeared long before, leaving behind a trail of excuses and the kind of charm that lingers like cologne. He was the kind of man who lived on promises. A letter here, a phone call there, the occasional postcard with a beach and a joke scrawled in half-legible ink. "Be good to your mom," he'd write. "I'll visit soon." Soon never came. But the thing about ghosts is they don't need to be present to haunt a house. Mark hovered over everything. His laugh echoed through old stories Emily told, his shadow hung in photo frames she never took down. Sometimes I'd catch her smiling at an old picture, not with love exactly, but with the warmth of a memory she refused to bury. And the boys, they worshipped him. When his name came up, their eyes softened. When mine did, they hardened. Still, I told myself love could be earned. That's what I believed then, that good men didn't need to be loved right away, only eventually. I did what men are supposed to do. I worked. I stayed. I provided. I taught Lucas to swim at the local rec center. He was afraid of the deep end, so I spent whole weekends waist deep in chlorinated water, coaxing him forward, cheering when he managed a few strokes. Jason wanted to make videos. I bought him his first used laptop, drove him to film clubs, listened to his endless monologues about editing software I couldn't pronounce. When the water heater broke, I fixed it. When the rent was due before I could get my paycheck, I borrowed against my own credit card. I worked overtime shifts, took weekend projects, drove home with numb hands and the taste of metal in my mouth. And every month, I covered another cost: braces, camp fees, tuition, sports equipment, doctor visits, insurance. If there was a bill, my name was on it. Something went wrong, I was the one they called. I kept waiting for that to mean something. For a thank you. For a glance of respect. For Emily to take my hand at the table and say, "He's done more for you than your father ever did." But she never said that. Not once. Instead, she said things like, "They just need time," or "They're kids, Thomas. They don't mean it." But time didn't soften them. It sharpened them. By the time they reached high school, their silence had turned into dismissal. I'd tell Jason to take out the trash and he'd pretend not to hear me. Then Emily would repeat the exact words and suddenly he'd move. Lucas would roll his eyes when I asked him to help in the yard. If I raised my voice, they'd look at me with that smug calm that teenagers master. The look that says, "You don't matter enough to make me angry." The first time it really cut was at a birthday dinner for Jason. 16 candles. I'd saved up for months to buy him a second-hand camera, one good enough to make short films, the kind he'd been talking about for years. I even wrote a little card saying how proud I was of him. When he opened it, he smiled, thanked Emily, and said, "This is awesome. Dad would love this kind of stuff." I waited for Emily to correct him. To say, "It's from Thomas." She didn't. She just smiled and poured him more soda. That was when I realized silence can be a wee asterisk p asterisk n too. After that, I stopped expecting gratitude. I told myself it was enough to know I was doing the right thing, even if no one noticed. That's what men tell themselves when they're trying not to feel invisible. And yet invisibility has a weight. It builds slowly. You don't feel it at first. But then one morning, you wake up and realize that you're holding up a house full of people who would barely notice if you collapsed. Emily changed too. Not all at once, slowly, almost kindly. Her affection became routine, her smiles rehearsed. She'd ask about work without listening to the answer. We still shared a bed, but the distance between us felt measured in years, not inches. I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't warm enough. Maybe I was too strict with the boys. Maybe love just didn't flow as easily from my kind of man, the working kind, the tired kind, the kind who measures affection in bills paid and lights kept on. But deep down I knew better. They didn't see me because they didn't need to. I was reliable, the most invisible kind of man there is. When Jason got into college, I handled the tuition forms, wrote the checks, drove him to campus. He barely said a word during the trip. When we arrived, I helped him carry boxes up to his dorm room. His roommate's father was there too, laughing, telling stories, taking pictures. Jason didn't introduce me to anyone. When I left, I stood in the parking lot and watched him walk away without turning back. On the drive home, Emily called to thank me for everything I'd done for our family. I remember that word, our. It sounded hollow. That night, Lucas asked if he could borrow my car for a date. I said yes. He didn't say thank you. He came home past midnight smelling like cheap beer and perfume. When I tried to talk to him about responsibility, he shrugged and said, "You're not my real dad." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even cruel in tone. It was casual, effortless. And somehow that made it worse. I didn't tell Emily. Not then. I told myself it was just a phase that boys test limits. But what they were testing wasn't my patience, it was my worth. They knew I wouldn't leave. That was my mistake. I taught them that love meant endurance, not boundaries. That no matter what they said, I'd keep showing up. I became the man who carried everything and asked for nothing. At work, people saw me as dependable, steady. The man who never lost his temper, never quit. At home, that steadiness turned into furniture, useful, silent, unnoticed. I remember once Emily saying, "You don't have to work so hard, Thomas." She meant it kindly, I think. But I looked around the room, at the furniture I'd paid for, the sons I'd raised, the walls I'd repaired, and realized she didn't understand. Work was all I had left to prove I existed. 16 years I gave that house. 16 years of overtime, of second chances, of dinners where my own name hung in the air like a guest's. And through it all, I kept believing that one day they'd see me. That one day Jason would call and say, "You were right, Thomas. You're the reason I made it." That Lucas would finally thank me for teaching him how to swim, how to keep going when fear tells you to stop. But that day never came. What came instead was a long, slow quiet, the kind that creeps in when you've been replaced not by another man, but by an idea of one. Mark still sent his postcards, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with a story about California sun and how he'd make it up to them soon. The boys framed those words in their hearts like scripture. I was the man who stayed, who paid, who repaired. And somehow that was never enough. Still I believed. Because belief is the last thing a man lets go of. Even when the walls start to tremble, even when the laughter stops including him, even when his own name feels foreign in his mouth, he tells himself there's still time. I told myself that too. Until the night it all broke. But that's another part of the story. For now, this is where it begins. A man at a dinner table, surrounded by the people he built his life around, realizing for the first time that love built on debt isn't love at all. It's an illusion. And illusions, no matter how much you pay for them, always collapse. Sunday dinners were supposed to mean something. That's what Emily used to say when we first got married. "It keeps us together," she'd tell me while setting the table, the smell of rosemary and roasted meat drifting through the house. For years I believed her. I thought that if we just kept showing up, kept cooking, kept smiling, kept pretending, eventually those rituals would become love. But by the 16th year, dinner had turned into theater. Same table, same chairs, same tired script. Emily played the part of the patient mother, the boys the distracted sons, and I, the provider, was the man no one listened to until the bills came due. That Sunday began like any other. I mowed the lawn early, trimmed the hedges, and set the table before Emily came downstairs. The afternoon light slanted through the blinds in thin, dusty ribbons. I put on a clean shirt, the one Emily used to say made me look put together. She didn't say it anymore. Lucas arrived first, slouched into his chair, phone in hand. Jason followed a few minutes later, earbuds in, face buried in some screen. Emily carried the turkey out of the oven like a peace offering, setting it down in the center of the table with a forced smile. "Smells good," I said. She nodded without looking at me. I carved the turkey, placed slices on each plate. The boys didn't look up. Lucas scrolled, Jason typed. Only when Emily repeated my request, "Put the phones away, please," did they obey. Not for me. For her. We ate in silence, punctuated only by the scrape of forks and the low hum of the refrigerator. The air felt heavy, like the moments before a storm when you can feel thunder building beneath your ribs. "So," I began carefully, "how's school?" Jason shrugged. "Fine." Lucas didn't answer at all. Emily offered a brittle smile. "Lucas made the soccer roster. Didn't you, honey?" He nodded, eyes still on his plate. "That's great," I said. "We'll have to get you new cleats before the season starts." No response. I tried again. "Jason, how's your editing project going?" He sighed. "It's fine." That word fine wasn't an answer. It was a wall. Emily poured more wine. "They're just tired," she said softly. No, I thought. They're not tired. They're gone. Dinner limped along for another few minutes. I forced conversation, they offered indifference. At some point, Lucas muttered something under his breath. Something about how, "Mom doesn't make us talk like this when Dad's around." It hit me like a slap I wasn't supposed to feel. I looked at him. "What did you say?" He froze for half a second, then smirked. "Nothing." Just saying we don't have to do these family dinners when we're with Dad. Jason laughed, that low, dismissive kind of laugh that fills a room with contempt. Emily put down her fork. Enough, both of you. But her voice lacked conviction. I could feel the air thickening, the walls closing in. My pulse thudded in my ears. I said quietly, "You're with your father what, 2 weekends a year?" Lucas shrugged. "Still feels better than this." That was the moment. Small words, simple tone, but everything inside me shifted. "Better than this?" I repeated. "Better than the roof over your head? The food on this table? The college bills? The car outside?" Jason leaned back, arms crossed, a mocking grin spreading across his face. "You always make everything about money." I stared at him. "Because that's what keeps this house standing." "Yeah," he said, "but money doesn't make you our dad." Emily's fork clattered against the plate. "Jason." He didn't stop. "It's true. Mark doesn't go around reminding us how much he spends. He doesn't have to." I felt something tear inside me, not loudly but completely. "Mark," I said slowly, "hasn't paid for a single thing in 16 years. Jason shrugged. "Still our dad." Lucas nodded. "Yeah. You can't buy that." The room went still. Emily stared at her wine glass, silent. She didn't defend me. Didn't even look up. 16 years of effort, erased in the space between her silence and their smirks. For a moment I couldn't move. I just watched them, the sons I had raised, the woman I had loved, sitting at a table I had bought in a house I had built, telling me I didn't belong there. I wanted to shout, to slam my fist on the table, to make them see the truth. But instead I felt an eerie calm wash over me. The kind that comes when a man realizes he's already lost. I set down my knife, wiped my hands on the napkin and looked at Emily. "Do you agree with them?" Her eyes flickered toward the boys, then back to me. "Thomas, please. Not now. Not now. Always later." Always silence. Jason leaned forward, voice sharp with teenage arrogance. "Come on, you don't have to make it a big deal. We were just talking." "No," I said quietly. "You were declaring something." He rolled his eyes. "Whatever." Lucas laughed under his breath. And there it was, the sound that ended 16 years of my life. A laugh. Small, cruel, dismissive. I stood slowly. The chair legs scraped against the floor. Emily reached out, panic flashing in her eyes. "Thomas, please sit down." I looked at her hand. The same hand I'd held through hospital rooms and mortgage signings. The same hand that now trembled, not out of love but out of fear of a scene. I said nothing. I walked to the kitchen sink, washed my hands and stared out the window at the darkening sky. The backyard was quiet. The porch light flickered. The life I had built hummed softly in the distance, indifferent. Behind me their voices blurred into whispers. I caught fragments, overreacting, embarrassing, always like this. When I turned back, Emily was clearing plates, pretending nothing had happened. Jason was scrolling his phone again. Lucas was texting. The world had reset and I was already erased from it. I sat down again, not to eat but to remember the moment. Every man has one. The instant he realizes he's been living inside someone else's story. The turkey had gone cold. The candles flickered low. The smell of burnt sugar clung to the air. Emily finally looked at me. "Can we just enjoy dinner, please?" I almost laughed. "Enjoy." But instead I nodded. "Sure." I forced a bite of turkey. Tasted like dust. The rest of the meal passed in silence. When it ended, the boys drifted upstairs. Emily began washing dishes. The sound of running water filled the room, covering the quiet between us. She didn't say sorry. She didn't even mention what had just happened. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "They're kids, Thomas. You know they don't mean it." I looked at her back, at the curve of her shoulders, the tired line of her neck. "They meant it," I said. She turned, drying her hands on a towel. "You can't take everything so personally." I almost smiled. How else should I take it? Her eyes dropped to the floor. She had no answer. I went to bed early that night. She followed later, slid under the covers without a word. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her breathing. The house was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was absence. I replayed the dinner again and again, the smirk, the laughter, the silence. Each memory sharper than the last. At some point, Emily whispered into the dark, "They'll understand one day." "No," I said softly. "They won't. Because you've never made them need to." She didn't answer. I listened to the clock ticking on the nightstand, each second a nail sealing the coffin of the man I used to be. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I would stop being the house's silent engine, the invisible hand, the wallet that never said no. If my voice had no place at their table, my money would have no place in their lives. And when that silence came, the one built not from words but from absence, they would finally hear me. Because respect, once lost, can only be taught through withdrawal. And I was done teaching with kindness. The morning after that dinner, I woke before dawn. The house was still. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. Emily lay beside me, her back turned, the distance between us measured not in inches but in years. For a long time, I just stared at the ceiling and thought about the sound of Lucas's laugh. That small, careless sound that had taken everything from me. There's a moment when exhaustion becomes clarity. It doesn't come with rage or noise. It arrives quietly, a stillness that settles in your chest like dust. I felt it then. The certainty that something was over. I went downstairs, made coffee, and sat at the dining table. The same table where they dismissed me the night before. The plates still sat in the sink, the smell of turkey and cold gravy hanging in the air. The house was filled with the ghosts of a meal that had buried 16 years of my life. I opened my laptop. 4 years, that screen had been my battlefield. Budgets, bills, tuition payments, endless evidence of my love disguised as numbers. Every digit on that spreadsheet was a piece of me. I scrolled through the list. Tuition, car insurance, phone plans, soccer fees, health insurance, rent, utilities, streaming subscriptions, credit cards. My name was everywhere. My signature sat under every illusion of family we'd ever built. That morning I began deleting myself. I started with the easy things, Netflix, Spotify, small comforts they never thanked me for. Then I moved to the heavier ones. Lucas's car insurance, Jason's tuition autopay, the joint credit card Emily used for household needs, that somehow always meant her sons. It wasn't anger guiding me. It was mathematics. For every unreturned kindness, I subtracted something tangible. Each cancellation was an equation in balance. When Emily came downstairs, I was already on my 4th call, the health insurance company. "Thomas," she said, still half asleep, "what are you doing up so early?" "Fixing things," I said. She poured coffee, watching me warily. "You're not still upset about last night?" "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm done." Her brow furrowed. "Done with what?" "With paying to be invisible." She frowned. "You're not making sense." "I'm making perfect sense," I said quietly. "You and your sons made it clear I have no voice here. So I'm taking my voice out of the budget." She laughed, that fragile, nervous sound people make when they sense danger but hope it's a joke. "Thomas, you can't just." "I can," I said, cutting her off. "And I already have." Her smile faltered. "You don't mean that." I looked at her over the rim of my mug. "Check your accounts." She did. I watched her face shift, confusion, disbelief, fear. "You froze the cards?" "I closed them," I said. Her voice rose. "Thomas, that's the boys' tuition, their car there?" "They're not my boys," I said. "At least, that's what they told me." She stared at me, stunned, as if I had struck her. "They're kids. They said something stupid. You're going to destroy everything over that?" "No," I said. "I'm letting everything destroy itself." She set the mug down hard. "You can't just walk away from responsibility. Responsibility without respect is slavery," I said. "And I've served long enough." She didn't speak after that. Just walked away, muttering something about me needing help, as if sanity were measured by how much humiliation a man can endure. By mid-morning, the consequences began to ripple. Jason came downstairs holding his phone. "My gas card's not working," he said. "I know," I answered. He frowned. "Did you forget to reload it?" "No. I canceled it." His confusion turned to anger. "What? Why?" "Because," I said calmly, "you told me I'm not your dad. And you're right." He blinked, stunned. "You're kidding." "No," I said. "You wanted your real father? Go ask him for gas money." He stood there, red-faced, jaw trembling. "That's messed up." I shrugged. "So were your words." He stormed off, slamming his bedroom door. An hour later, it was Lucas's turn. "Netflix isn't working," he called from the living room. "Of course it's not," I said. "It's mine." He laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Seriously, what's the password?" "I changed it." He lowered his phone. "Why are you being so petty?" "Petty?" I repeated, smiling faintly. "Petty is pretending I don't exist while living off my paycheck." He didn't have a response. Just walked away, muttering curses under his breath. By noon, the house was silent again. Not peaceful, just hollow. Emily paced the kitchen, calling me heartless under her breath. I sat at the table, listening to the sound of her footsteps, the frantic rhythm of a woman realizing her safety net had disappeared. That evening she tried reason. You're making a point, Thomas. I get it. But you've made it. Turn it back on. No. Her eyes glistened. You can't do this to them. They did it to themselves. She shook her head. You're punishing them for being young. I'm reminding them what adulthood costs. Mark won't help, she whispered. I know, I said. Maybe that's the lesson. She pressed her palms to her temples. You're going to ruin them. No, I said. I'm going to save what's left of me. That night the house went still. I sat alone in the living room, the glow of the muted TV casting shadows across the furniture. Every corner of that house was something I had paid for. Every comfort had come through me. And now it all felt foreign, like furniture in a stranger's home. For years I thought I was building a family. Turns out I was funding a performance. Around midnight I poured a drink and stood by the window. The neighborhood was quiet, the streetlights pale and steady. Somewhere across the city Mark was probably asleep, dreaming of the family that still worshipped him. In the dark reflection on the glass I saw my own face, older than I remembered, tired, hollow. But behind the fatigue there was something new, freedom. The next morning brought the first real fallout. Jason came down pale, waving his phone. Dad, my school account's frozen. They said tuition hasn't been paid. I looked at him. Call your father. You mean Mark? Yes. The man you said was your real dad. He laughed in disbelief. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. He stared at me like I was a stranger. You're insane. No, I said. I'm awake. He left without another word. Lucas followed later, furious. My insurance got canceled. What if something happens to me? Then your father can cover it, I said. It's his name you respect, not mine. You can't do this, he shouted. I already did. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe for the first time he was seeing the man behind the paychecks. That afternoon, Emily confronted me again. You've made your point. Please stop this before it's too late. Too late for what? I asked. For us. I studied her face, the same face I used to trace with my hand when we were still new, still foolish enough to believe effort was enough. Now it looked worn, defensive, distant. There's no us left, I said. There's just me and 3 people who learned to live without gratitude. Tears welled in her eyes. You'll regret this. I regret staying this long. She left the room, slamming the door hard enough to shake the picture frames. I sat there, listening to the echo fade, and realized something simple. Love built without respect collapses the moment you stop holding it up. That evening, as the sun sank behind the houses, I walked through each room slowly, touching the things I'd bought. The couch, the lamps, the shelves. It was like saying goodbye to a version of myself I no longer needed. When I reached the dining room, I saw the table still set for 4. Plates unwashed. Forks resting on cold napkins. It looked like the aftermath of a funeral. In a way it was the death of illusion. And for the first time in 16 years I didn't feel grief. I felt something closer to relief. Tomorrow, I thought, the reckoning will begin. The next morning began with a hole where the noise used to be. No cabinet doors, no running water, no careless laughter from upstairs. A house learns its people. Mine had learned to expect demands. Now it held its breath like a creature that knows the hunter has stopped caring. Emily left early to clear her head. She didn't say where. Jason texted me a single line. You'll fix this or we're done. Lucas sent nothing. The boys had discovered that consequences don't blink, and their first instinct was to stare harder. I didn't stare back. I made coffee, walked the perimeter of rooms I had paid for, and listened to the absence settling into the corners. Silence is not peace. It's the sound life makes when it runs out of bargains. By noon the first calls came in. A counselor from the university asking about Jason's unpaid balance. An insurance rep confirming Lucas's removal from my policy. I spoke softly, calmly, the way a man does when he has finally accepted the price of being visible. Each sentence ended with the same coda. Please direct all further questions to their mother. The reps paused, professional sympathy wobbling through the line, then moved on. The world does not argue with a ledger. Neighbors noticed. The cul-de-sac runs on gossip, and a quiet house is louder than a siren. Mrs. Klein caught me at the mailbox, hand on my arm, eyes kind. You did what you could, Thomas? I nodded. She didn't ask for details. Kind people never do. They just see the weight leave your shoulders and know something heavy fell. That evening, Emily returned with a face like a storm that ran out of rain. She stood in the kitchen, arms folded across the wreckage of 100 small betrayals. "You've humiliated me," she said. "They can't register. They can't drive. We're drowning." The word we staggered under its own hypocrisy. I didn't raise my voice. "You let them choose another man as their father. Now let that choice do the dishes." "You're cruel." "No. I'm accurate." She pressed her fingers to her eyes. "They're scared. They learned nothing when they were safe. Are you proud of this?" "No," I said. "I'm finished with it." We slept back to back. The mattress felt like a border. In the darkness, I realized how many years the word we had meant me. A strange comfort followed, standing at last in the single hard light of truth. Days passed. The house adjusted. Dust settled in places always wiped clean by constant use. I boxed the last of the boys' trophies and shirts and left them by the door. No theatrics. Just order. The doorbell rang twice. I didn't answer. I had become a man who no longer performed. On the third day, Jason called. Not to apologize. Boys don't apologize to men they've never learned to fear losing. He called to negotiate. "Look, if you pay this semester, I'll sort the rest. I'll talk to him. I'll make him help." "Him?" "Mark." "And what will you say to him?" "That he owes me." I let the words hang there until he heard them himself. "Owes me." The pebble finally touched the bottom of the well. "I can't lose my spot," he said, voice thinning. "You know what this means for me." "Do you know what I meant to you?" I asked. Silence. Then a dull, embarrassed anger. "You're punishing me for telling the truth." "No," I said. "I'm letting the truth stand up on its own." He hung up. Boys prefer slamming doors they don't own. Lucas tried charm. "We were out of line," he said, standing in the doorway like a kid caught stealing. "I'll do more around the house." "Oh. You'll learn," I said. "That's what you'll do." He scowled. "You enjoy this." "I enjoy breathing." "You think you're the only one who sacrificed?" "No," I said. "I think I'm the only one who paid." He left quietly. Progress arrives humbly. A week later, Emily packed. Half a day spent folding the soft fabrics of a marriage into sharp rectangles. She moved to her sister's place in Alabama with the boys. She took the plants, 2 lamps, 3 framed photos. She left the heavy furniture. Love's debris. Before she closed the door, she looked at me with a face I had never seen on her, a fragile mixture of shame and calculation. "They'll hate you for this." "They already did," I said. "They just hadn't earned it." When the taillights disappeared, the house exhaled. The silence changed key. It no longer accused. It observed. I started from small rituals. I cleaned the stove until it reflected my hands. I oiled the porch hinges. I took the batteries out of remote controls and placed them in a cracked coffee mug. I opened windows and let Atlanta heat wander the rooms, sticky and honest. Obligations evaporate best under sunlight. On the second evening alone, I dragged the dining table to the curb. 16 years of Sunday theater sat there like a prop waiting for a different play. By morning it was gone. Someone else wanted the ritual, I wanted the floor space. People called in bursts. Emily's sister warned me I'd die alone. A friend from work said I'd done the right thing. The university sent 3 emails, then an impersonal final notice. Mark called once, left a message that began with bluster and ended with pleading. I didn't return it. I had nothing left to teach a ghost. The first real quiet came on a Thursday night. No buzzing phone. No footsteps above me. Just cicadas outside and an ice cube surrendering in a glass. I sat on the porch and realized I could finally hear my own breath. I had been a man underwater for so long that air sounded new. I slept. Not the hard, defensive sleep of a man on trial, but the soft, drifting sleep of a man whose verdict has been read. In the mornings, I read books I'd stacked for years and never touched. Pages turned without interruption. Sentences finished without someone calling my name from the other room only to ignore my answer. I walked the neighborhood at dusk and didn't wonder who needed what from me when I returned. I cooked for one and left no notes on the counter about leftovers. The trash can filled slowly, proof that peace has a smaller appetite than chaos. Regret tried its tricks. It came late, when the house was dark, wearing the faces of boys I had trained myself to accept. It whispered, "You could have stayed a little longer. You could have softened more. You could have been the bigger man forever." I let the whisper run out of breath. Then I asked it a question I should have asked years ago. At what cost? Days became honest. In honesty you meet yourself again. He looked older than I remembered, but he stood straight. News filtered back through the cul-de-sac network. Tuition deferred, the used car sold, a part-time job that lasted a week. Emily's voice once on the phone, thin and tired, asking if I'd consider helping with just the essentials. I did, I said. For 16 years. What do you want, Thomas? She asked. I already took it, I said. Myself. After that, nothing. Silence did not feel like a wall anymore. It felt like a road. A month passed. The house settled around the idea that it belonged to one person now. I learned which floorboards creak and how to step between them. I learned the exact pattern of sunlight across the living room rug at 5 p.m. I learned that freedom tastes like coffee gone cold because no one interrupts you to drink it hot. Neighbors waved. Some asked how I was holding up. I told them the truth, better than I expected, worse than I deserved, exactly what I needed. On a Sunday, I drove past a park where a father taught his boy to throw a baseball. Simple motions, small corrections, patience shaped like a hand on a shoulder. I parked for a minute and watched. No envy exactly. More like recognition. There are some bonds you don't replace. You respect them from a distance and keep your hands in your pockets. That night, I sat at the kitchen counter, the only chair left by choice, and wrote a list titled What Remains. It wasn't long. A roof. A job. 2 hands. Time. A name no one else gets to edit. I folded the paper and put it in the drawer where the emergency candles are kept. Some truths you save for outages. Weeks later, an envelope arrived addressed in Jason's handwriting. Inside, a single page. Not an apology. A budget. Numbers scrawled like confessions. Rent, food, fees. At the bottom, if you can help, I'll pay you back. I stared at the line for a long time. Something steadied inside me. I wrote 2 words across the margin. Earn it, then set the letter under a magnet on the fridge. Some lessons need to keep looking at you before they cross a street safely. I don't wish them pain. I just refuse to keep cushioning their landings. A man who never lets others hit ground only teaches them to fall without fear. Tonight the porch is warm. The sky hangs heavy, bruised with summer. I sit with a book I may or may not finish and a glass I don't rush. Freedom is slow on purpose. Somewhere Mark is rehearsing a new version of himself. Somewhere, Emily is learning that silence feels different when it answers to her name. And somewhere, the boys are discovering the weight of keys that open doors only if you paid to keep the locks. Was I cruel? Or did I finally choose the one thing a man is allowed to keep when love turns to debt? His boundaries, his breath, his right to leave the fire he has been feeding? Tell me, in a house where respect was always missing, would you have kept paying the bill?